Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Vav. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Chanukah. We'll be learning today B'Yirtzeh Hashem Daf Kuf Mem Hey Amid Beis. We're holding in Siman Taf Reish Ayin Vav. We pick up on Kuf Mem Hey Amid Aleph, 2 lines from the bottom. Siman Taf Reish Ayin Vav Sif Hey. Now it's a little bit of a short sif and not that much Mishnah Berurah. Slightly confusing. But I do think that tonight's shir will be a little bit of an abbreviated shir. I had hoped to use the opportunity to gain a little ground, but it was not to be. Okay, so here we go. Tafrei Shayin Vav Sifhei says the Mechaber. Yaschil lahadlik belel rishon. We begin to light the menorah on the first night of Chanukah, baner hayoser yemini, using the licht that is all the way to the right. So we're standing facing our menorah. It's the first night. We have to light the first licht. Which one do we light? The one all the way to the right, says the Mechaber. Ubelel sheni, and then on the second night, kishe yosef ner echod samach loi, when we're going to add another ner to be mekayim the hiddur mitzvah of mahadrin min mahadrin. So we're going to light another ner next to the existing ner. Yaschil v'yavarech al hanoisaf. We make the bracha and we begin to light by lighting the ner that we added tonight. Shehu kedei lahafnois liyamin. So on the first night we lit the licht all the way to the right. The second night we're going to add another ner next to it. That's going to be to the left of last night's licht. Which one do we light first? Yaschil v'yavarech ala noisaf. We make the bracha and we begin the lighting with the new ner that we added tonight, which is to the left of last night's ner. Shehu yoser smali, it's more to the left. Why do we do it that way, says the Mechaber? Kedei lahafnois liyamin. So that when we have to move in a direction, we should move to the right. So the first one that we light is the new one that's to the left, and then we move our hands to the right. And if you take a look right now in Mishnah Berurah Ois Katan Yud, all the way, most of the way down the column of Mishnah Berurah on Kuf Mem Hey Amid Beis, the Chavetz Chaim says, why are we so concerned that we should go to the right? K'moshe Amru Chazal, because this is in line with what Chazal always say, Kol Pinois Shata Poine. Whenever we turn, lo yehei elo derech yamin. We should always turn to the right. And the famous example of this is the Kohen doing the Avodah on the Mizbeach. When the Kohen had to do the Avodah on the Mizbeach HaChitzain, and he had to make the matnos damim, he had to make the sprinkling of the bloods on the Mizbeach, he went up the ramp, he went to the Sovev, to the ledge that went around the Mizbeach, and he turned to the right. Then, as he walked along the ledge, he's walking due east, and when he came to the corner, he kept his body facing the Mizbeach, and he turned, and he kept leading to his right. Kol pina shata paina, aina paila liyamin. And therefore, so too when we light the menorah, when we have to go in a certain direction, we want to go to the right. So each night we add a new ner, we light the leftmost one first, and then we continue going to the right. Continues the Mechaber, top line Kuf Mem Hey Amid Beis, V'chein belel shlishi, so too on the third night, Kishe Yosef oid echad, when we add on another ner, Samach lishnei nerois harishonos, next to the two lichtalach that we lit on the first night and the second night. So again, we're adding another one to the left. Yaschil banoisaf. We make the bracha and we start lighting with the leftmost ner, the one we just added. Uba yaschil bracha. That's where we make the bracha. V'achakach yifnel etzad yamin. And then again, we go to the right and we move our hand rightwise to continue to the right. V'chein b'chal laila. And this is what we do each and every night. Nimtza comes out. Shetamid mivarech al hanoisaf. We're always making the bracha on the ner that we're adding for that night, shehu moira al hanes, and that new ner is the one that shows and it makes the parsume nisa over the continuation of the nes. The nes continue another day. The nes continue another day. Sharei b'taisefes hayamim nitaisef hanes, because with each additional day, that's the addition of the nes. It wasn't only a 1-day nes, it was a 2-day nes, then a 3-day nes, and so on and so on. Okay, that was the Mechaber. Now let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah, back Kuf Mem Hey Amud Aleph, bottom line, Mishnah Berurah Ois Katan Tes. Now, before I read the Mishnah Berurah inside, let me give a little hakdama so that it'll be easy to understand what the Mishnah Berurah says. Let's remember, B'yimei HaChazal, the original takana of Neres Chanukah was that they lit the Neres Chanukah outside of the doorway. So the menorah was placed outside of the house, outside of the door, and it was betefach hasamuch lepesach, within a tefach of the door. And we learned that you're supposed to put the menorah on the side of the doorway opposite the menorah. So when you're walking into your house, the mezuzah is on the right. The menorah would be at the outside of the doorway on the left, with the menorah positioned within a tefach of the mashkoif, of the doorpost. That's the way it originally was. Now, already in the time of the Shulchan Aruch, in the time of the Rishonim, it was already, unfortunately, we're in Galus, the people were not really able to light outside anymore, so they moved the menorahs inside. And as we've seen already previously, originally, when they moved the menorahs inside, they didn't do what we do nowadays. They didn't light by the window. They lit inside of the doorway. So they kept the menorah still by the doorway, but instead of keeping it outside of the door, they brought the menorah inside of the door. So now let's imagine that the menorah is inside the doorway, and let's talk from the perspective of a person standing inside the house facing the doorway. So from his perspective, the mezuzah is on the left, right? Because the mezuzah is positioned on the right when you're entering the house. From the perspective of somebody outside who's coming into the house, then the mezuzah is on the right. But if you're standing inside the house and you're facing out, the mezuzah is on the left. So now let's picture in our minds what would go on by Chanukah. The mezuzah is on the left. They would position the menorah on the right. So you have, let's say, a little table, and on that little table next to the right side doorpost, you would put the menorah. And the left of the menorah would be kind of towards the door. The right of the menorah would be towards the house. It would be going further in the house. And on the left doorpost, you have the mezuzah. Okay, now, what's going to be a little bit confusing over here is that when the Mishnah Berurah uses the word right and left, he's not talking from the perspective of inside the house. He's talking from the perspective of outside of the house. But when we envision this, we really have to envision it from the perspective of somebody inside the house. And I'll try to point out where it's incongruent or where it's counterintuitive. So, says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Tes, Banera Yoser Yamini Yaschil V'Yavarach Ala Noisaf. So what the Mechaber told us is, how do we light the menorah? We begin to light the menorah the very first night. We start all the way on the right side of the menorah. Each day we add another licht. We're adding that licht going to the left. So on the first night, position number 1 in the menorah is the ner on the menorah all the way to the right. On day 2, we're going to add another ner in position number 2, going to the left. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ve'ein chilik, there's no difference, according to the Mechaber, bein shemaniach miyamin haPesach, whether you have a case where you're not putting the menorah on the side opposite the mezuzah, you're putting the menorah on the right side. The right side meaning the side that has the mezuzah. If you're standing inside looking out, that would be the left. But the Mishnah Berurah is calling it the right because mezuzah goes on the right. So when the Mishnah Berurah is saying like this, when the Mechaber tells you that you should start lighting the menorah from position number 1, from the rightmost ner, ein chilik, there's no difference. Bein shemeniach miyamin Pesach, whether you're placing the menorah on the right side of the doorway, which is the side that has the mezuzah, which if you are standing inside looking outside, we would call it the left, ubein shemeniach mismoil, or whether you're putting the menorah on the left side of the doorway, meaning the side opposite the mezuzah, which again, if you're standing inside looking out, it's the right side. In either case, the first licht that you light, according to the Mechaber, is the one all the way to the right. Tamid, we turn the page, Tamid yaschel habracha baner hanoisaf. The first licht goes all the way to the right, and then each day we begin the lighting and we make the bracha on the new ner, which is more to the left. That's the sheet of the Mechaber. Now, what is the point that the Chavetz Chaim is trying to make? The point is like this. Let's remember, when we add a new ner every night, that new ner is not the Iker mitzvah of Chanukah. That new ner is Hidur mitzvah. It's really only one ner that is the Iker mitzvah of Chanukah. That's one critical piece of information we have to keep in mind. The second critical piece of information we have to keep in mind is when it comes to the placement of the menorah, what did we learn? We learned that the best place to place the mezuzah is within a tefach of the doorway. Now, I want you to imagine like this. In the two scenarios that the Chavetz Chaim just gave, you're standing inside your house and you're looking out. So you're facing the doorway and you're looking out. The typical place to put the menorah would be on your right. It would be on the right doorpost opposite the mezuzah. And the mezuzah would be lined up going left to right. Right? So if you're looking at the menorah, the left side of the menorah is going to the door. The right side of the menorah is going towards the interior of the house. Now, in that case, if you're putting the mezuzah, the menorah, by the doorpost, the reality is that it is the leftmost ner of the menorah that is the closest to the doorpost. The ner that is all the way on the right side of the menorah, that one is actually sticking into the house. That ner is further removed from the doorpost. If you're lighting on the side that has the mezuzah, then it's the opposite. Then the ner all the way on the right is the one that's closest to the doorpost, and the more left you go is further away from the doorpost. Okay, says the Chavetz Chaim, the shita of the Mechaber does not give that fact any credence. The shita of the Mechaber is that is irrelevant. The bottom line is, whether you're lighting on the side that has the mezuzah, whether you're lighting on the side that does not have the mezuzah, the halacha is you always add a new ner to the left, and that's the ner that you light first. Why would you think that maybe you shouldn't do that? Well, let's see now the Yesh Omrim that the Chavetz Chaim quotes. The Yesh Omrim, however, there is a Yesh Omrim, and this is a Marsha, that says, the emunach b'yamin Pesach, if you're lighting the menorah on the same side that the mezuzah would typically go on. Now, the reason I'm saying it that way is, why would you put the menorah on that side? Well, one reason you would put the menorah on that side is if for some reason the doorway that you're lighting by is not chayiv b'mezuzah. We learned earlier, if the doorway that you're lighting by, for whatever reason, is not chayiv b'mezuzah, maybe it doesn't have the lintel and the two doorposts, whatever it is. But if it's not chayiv b'mezuzah, then you don't light on the side opposite the mezuzah. You light on the side that would normally have the mezuzah, because that's on the right when you come into the house, and the right side is more choshev. So, says the Marshal like this, Im munach b'yamin Pesach. If you're writing on what we call the right side of the doorway, which again, if you're looking from the perspective of inside the house, is on the left. If you're lighting on the left, the Marshal says, Azai tzarich lahaschil tamid, then you should always begin the lighting baner hayamini, with the rightmost ner, shehu samach lapesach, because it's closer to the door. Again, what the Marshal is saying is like this. The Marshal is saying, let's go back. What are the things to take into consideration when you consider how you should light the menorah? So we start all the way, the Mechaber said, we start all the way on the right, and each day we add another one to the left. Which one do we light first? We light the leftmost one first. Why? Because there's a chazal, kalpina shata paine na paine liyamin. We want you to light the left one first so that you should move to the right. This halacha of kalpina shata paine na paine ela liyamin, does it have anything to do with Chanukah? Is it a Chanukah-based halacha? No, it's not a Chanukah-based halacha. There's nothing to do with Chanukah, right? But there is a halacha that does have to do with Chanukah. What's that halacha? That halacha is that really the ner of Chanukah is supposed to be placed in the tefach hasamuch lepesach. It's supposed to be within a tefach of the doorway. Then there's another halacha of Chanukah, and that is that the ikar mitzvah of Chanukah is ner ishu beisai, is one ner. This that we light additional neris is only mahadrim and a mahadrim. Therefore, says the Marshal, if you're standing inside your house and you're looking out the door and you're going to light on your left, you're going to light on the left side of the doorway, which is the side that normally has the mezuzah, what we call the right if you're coming in from the outside. If you're going to light on that side, well, in that case, which ner is closest to the Pesach? The ner all the way on the right of the menorah. Well, in that case, says the Marshal, why on the sixth night of Chanukah would you start lighting with the ner that's all the way to the left in position number 6, going towards the left of the menorah, so it's further removed from the doorway, and the first one that you light is the ikar mitzvah. For the ikar mitzvah, you should light the one that's closest to the doorway. So says the Marshal, in that scenario, you know what you should do? The first one you should light should be the one all the way to the right. And then you should continue going to the left. That has nothing to do with Chanukah. What's more critical is that the first one that you light should be in the best position mitam hilchas Chanukah, and that's the one all the way to the right. So in that scenario, the Marshal says, light the one on the right first, and then march to the left. If you're lighting on the other side of the doorway, what I'm going to call the right side, again from the perspective of inside the house looking out, if you're lighting on the right side, well, in that case, says the Marshal, then you're right. Then light the leftmost one first, because that's closest to the doorway. But that's why the Marshal says it depends where you're lighting the menorah. The Chavetz Chaim said the Mechaber didn't make any chiluk. So apparently the Mechaber wasn't maskim to this chiluk. The Mechaber said you don't have to be concerned about it. But the Marshal is concerned about it. So again, the Marshal, the Yeshayimrim, there are those that say the munach b'yamin Pesach. If you're writing on the right side, again, the right side coming from the outside, which I'm going to call the left, azayit tzarich lahaskel tamid baner yamini. Then you have to start the lighting from the rightmost licht, shehu sabach lepesach, because that's the closest to the door, and that's the critical factor for Hilchas Chanukah. V'hoylech miyamin l'smail, and then you continue from the right to the left. V'meniach haneros b'smail pesach. But if you put it on the other side, what I'm going to call the right, you have to start the lighting with the licht that's closest to the door, which would be the leftmost one. And then you would go from the left to the right. Okay, so here we had two shittas. We had the sheet of the Mechaber, the sheet of the Marshal. The Biur Halacha actually brings down yet another shita. He brings down the shita of the Lavush. Yeah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, however, Udavid Kamar Ovid, either way you do it, you yaitza the mitzvah, because let's remember that this is all Hiddur mitzvah. As a matter of fact, if you go all the way to the bottom line of this lengthy Bir Halacha Dibra Maskil, Kidei Lahafnois Liyamin, all the way on the bottom line, the Chavetz Chaim says, Ve'ein nafkamina b'chol zeh be'etzem ha-mitzvah. When it comes to the etzem mitzvah of Neres Chanukah, there's no chilik. The b'chol gavdi yoytze l'kuli alma. No matter what you do, l'kuli alma you yoytze the mitzvah of Chanukah. Rakalein yilichatchila be'eza makom nachin yoyser la'aschel la'adlik mimenu. This is all a Torah in Hiddur mitzvah. It's all a Torah l'chatchila. What's the best way to do the Hiddur mitzvah? But yezikha yoytze the mitzvah there is Chanukah no matter what way you do it. Now says the Mishnah Berurah, right by the Ois Kat Tezayin for the Sharet Zion, Uma toiv v'nachayin. How good and proper would it be im yachal l'sader kulam if you would be able to set up the menorah not going left to right in the same direction as the doorway. Instead of lighting the menorah parallel to the door space, turn the menorah and do it perpendicular to the doorway, sort of like parallel to the doorpost. Turn it in the other direction. How good and proper would it be if you could actually put the menorah in the opening of the doorway, in the other direction, so that all of the neiros would be equidistant to the doorpost, and they're all within the tefach of the doorpost. That would be the best. However, if you do that, Yizar, you would have to be careful. You would have to make sure not to open the door. Must be talking about a deep door, a deep doorway. That somehow you could have the menorah in there and still have the door closed. But if that's your situation, make sure not to open the door so that the wind can't get in. To put it out. Okay, Ois Kat Yud we did. Ois Kat Yud Aleph. Each night we make the bracha on the new ner. Says the Mishnah Berurah, this seder that the Mechaber gives, that we start with the rightmost ner every night, add another one to the left, and light from the left to the right. The same halacha applies if you're lighting by the window, or by the door, or in the shul. On the first night we light the rightmost ner, the second night we add another one to its left. We always start the lighting with the new ner, and then we continue to the right. And the Chavetz Chaim says, following this, Yarchik is atzmai lutzad smoil be'ez hahadlaka. When you're making the bracha and you're getting ready to light, you should be positioned to the left of the menorah. Kidei sheyifka bo tchila. If you're facing your menorah and you're holding the lit shamish and you're making the brachas, you don't want your hand, let's say again, it's the 6th night of Hanukkah. I always pick on the 6th. If it's the 6th night of Hanukkah, you don't want your hand with the shamish to be positioned by ner number 3, so that when you finish making the brachas, you have to go from there to ner number 6 and start lighting. Why, says the Mishnah Berurah? Because we want kidei sheyifka bo tchila. We want that the first ner that you get to is the one that you're actually lighting. V'lo yitztarich lahaver ala mitzvahs. You shouldn't be maver ala mitzvahs. Again, remember, the ikar mitzvah of Neres Chanukah is to light one ner. If you're positioned by ner number 3 when you finish making the brachas, really you could just light ner number 3 and be yaitz the mitzvah. By moving your hand now from ner number 3 to number 4 to number 5 and ultimately to number 6, really you're being maver ala mitzvahs. We don't want you to be maver ala mitzvahs, so make sure you're positioned by ner number 6. And according to the Marshal that we saw, according to the Marshal, let's say you're going to start lighting from the right, be positioned by the right. V'adlaka yetamid baner sha'ayimid b'tzad smal k'mash kasavnu u'payna v'haylech l'tzad yemin. Okay, interesting. Not too many people, I think, realize that there is this discussion over precisely what direction we should go in when we light the menorah. Okay, thank you so much for joining me for Liban HaTorah. Discussing Liban HaTorah should be making against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbe Shalom should say, Yeshua Serfuas Parnasit Sheduchim Tol Al Zanid. We should be zeicher to see the B'yas Gal Tzedek. Amen. Be well.